Yeah, so I'm recording now.
Okay. So this has sort of, this book is and our conversations about Niho Taniwha has kind of guided me. I'm kind of feel like I'm going a bit like this, up a little pathway. And part of last week I said I was going to learn some karakia, and I'm learning them. It's quite hard to retain. My memory is not as good as it used to be. And also linking, because I don't know the language so well. If I don't understand it, if the word's new, it's hard to remember. But I also thought, well, my job is with deaf and hard of hearing people, children. So I need to go down the line of Turi Māori, so when I'm doing something. So I also need to learn the signs for the karakia. So that's kind of my next step. That's where it's taken to me. And we had some professional learning on Tuesday about ka hikatia, and the facilitator was talking about, remember, we're talking about Turi Māori, not just Māori in our context, it's Turi Māori. So I'm kind of trying to add that in to my cultural competence. And, there's now two cultures that I have to, that I'm working with, the deaf culture and the Māori culture, and the way those worlds meet. So that's quite interesting.
About Turi, she's talking about just what you've said about your deaf culture and the Māori culture, and then blending them together.
Yeah, so it's deaf Māori, and for a long time, they had no access on the marae. I think there's 3 trilingual interpreters in the whole country. So that makes it really hard for Māori to access anything that's going on at a hui or a tangi. But I think there is more support, there's more support for them. There are stories of deaf Māori, where a relative has died and they've actually been able to participate on the marae, because I think for a long, and historically, deaf people were just sort of put to the side, and they weren't kind of embraced as much as you would think they would be. They weren't considered. And I guess because there was no sign language in Te Reo. So now they're also developing signs, Māori language signs, which is quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I was talking to you previously about being in at a school, and they were actually doing the origins of kapahaka. And it was interesting to know that the wiri is different for people that are in the bush will wiri up like that. And if you are from like Ngāti Awa, where we wiri down here, and it's more because of the ocean. And I found that really, really interesting. I mean, me being Māori, I'm like I said in our previous time together, it's something that I know who I am, but I'm actually don't know a lot of the tikana. And so I found that really interesting. So this teacher was teaching the class, and it was a mixture of Māori and Pākehā. And actually Vietnamese, and they were all participating in it. But that was something that interests me. And just with you talking, it's like, when they do action songs or poi, do any of those actions have any relevance to, like when they sway like this? I mean, and they're out, do those actions create some of the story? Do you know what I mean? Of the song that they're singing, or the waiata, where people who are deaf could relate to that? I'm not sure.
Yes, well, I think they do. So they will be taught those signs, and there are new signs incorporated too. So I can send you maybe a couple of links to, some waiata where it's, deaf signed signed and sung. There's
Actually,
a few on our website that I can
that
look
might
at.
be quite good to put on our document and just put those links there, because it's all about and it comes down to that chapter 6 that I've been reading about culture competence,
or
culture
competence.
counts. And it talks about, and I thought it was really interesting, cultural competence can relate to how well we interact with people from any cultural community of people, including deaf, rainbow and ethnic groups. And I think, I started reading this chapter and I was thinking, yeah, I can remember, where is it? I think it's on page. I actually thought, Russell Bishop and Ted Glynn's 2003 book called Culture Counts, Changing Power Relations in Education. And I think what you brought up is really pertinent, because a couple of students that I had were Māori, they were deaf, and one was profoundly deaf. And I think that's when their culture is brought into it, like you were talking about, it becomes meaningful. It's something that they identify with, they know who they are. And they've also got, that whole thing of where they're deaf and they can't hear, and to have that, I think, is just amazing. And it's looking at what, just changing those power relationships for them, and in many different ways. Often we just talk about the classroom and our tamariki who are Māori, and just partnering with them. But I hadn't looked at it in your context, and I just find that really interesting. So those links on our document would be really, really good.
Yep, yeah. I'll do that. And what you're talking about, chapter 6, they're talking about Māori need to be able to see themselves in their learning context. And it's the same for our deaf students. They need to be able to see themselves. And we've just been doing a big thing on identity, who am I, and do I identify as deaf? Because some people don't identify as deaf. They go, oh no, I'm not deaf, I don't need my hearing aids. And it's kind of like there's a process, there's four quadrants of identification or something. But we have what is called a KIT day, keep in touch day, and we gather our students together, because most of them are in mainstream schools, and they don't always see other people who are deaf or who have cochlear implants or who can sign, and they might be the only student in the school. So when we get together and have KIT days, it's really lovely to see them connecting, and it's older students with younger students. And the other day we had one, we went to the Hamilton Museum, we were looking at identity, and there was a new student, and he was from the Philippines, and he was a year 13, so he's quite a mature boy. And he is profoundly deaf, and he's nonverbal, he's a signer, but his first language is American Sign Language, ASL. So, but it's about 40% the same. It's similar, but not as much as British and Australian Sign Language. But our kids, one of my students, who's a real delight, she's got a really big personality. She was going up and having the conversation with this boy, and she's 10 and he's 18, and it was just lovely to see them connect. And they were trying to understand, and she knows quite a lot of New Zealand Sign Language, and they were having this great connection. But often they can't, like Turi Māori are not going to see themselves reflected in the learning very easily unless they have meetings, with other like-minded people in the countryside. But yeah. It's that cultural competence is quite a challenging chapter too, where they talk about the Tātai Ako document, which sets out 5 cultural competences, and also there's the tool, the continuum, to put you where you put yourself on, and it's interesting because I kind of feel like I'd like to say I'm at the acceptance level, but sometimes I slip back to minimization and defense. I hope I'm not in denial. I hear a lot of comments. There's a lot of New Zealanders in denial and defense, but I hope that I'm more at the acceptance and appreciate the cultural differences, but it's just kind of taking that next step about where to go with that and how to get into
the adaptation.
And yeah, it's quite challenging in a way, because I can just say, oh well, it's too hard, or I can try and take a little step, but I'm not really sure what would that look like in the community.
Yeah, I think so, and I think, you know, in the adaptation, if we look at that, you know, you're an inclusive practitioner, you know, and you do include aspects of other cultures, and you think about their own worldview. And I think for me as well, it's been able to bring it like that, you know, where it's weaved into whatever intervention or and I think it's always coming back to those whakawhanaungatanga meetings where you're meeting with whānau or another ethnic group, and you're considering their beliefs, their ecological framework on where they are. Like often I'll meet with whānau and they've got extended whānau that live with them. So there's a lot going on, and it's them being able to listen to their voice. I'm always reminded of at that beginning chapter is who is at my table. You know, that's so I actually photographed it, enlarged it, and I've got it right next door on one of my pin boards, and it reminds me who's at my table, you know, and just considering different things. I think it's the integration when, like for myself, you know, I'm Māori, I know who I am, but there's just many facets that I don't go into because I don't feel I know enough, if that makes sense. So it's getting that knowledge and being confident to go, actually, I do know that protocol, or I do know that, you know, where I'm going in my role, you know, I'm okay with, especially with our Māori families who are fluent in Te Reo Māori. You know, I'll go in and I'll say, would we like to start with the karakia? And I always look at the man because I know that's the protocol, rather than me just begin to lead something. So I have a little karakia that I know off by heart, or I might, you know, have. And I just am mindful of my pronunciation, and that was part of that aromatawai. It was like instead to read the words, and I thought I really need Hora, our Māori RTLB, to be sitting here with me to give me some advice on my pronunciation. But then again, she's Pūhoi, and Ngātiawa's dialect is a little bit different. So
slightly different.
So once I start my Te Reo classes that I keep talking about, so I was talking to my husband about it because my son's just started a Te Reo course, and he was telling me last night, he said, oh, you'll be able to kōrero with your son. He's just started a little journey himself, and I'm so proud of him. So
hey, with regards to that, because I don't know. I'm thinking about my next year, and I had a look at Te Reo classes online and even face-to-face in the Whakatane district, and they're all full for next year. So it's so popular because they're free as well. But I don't know if they have a waiting list, or if you know somebody, if you have a connection.
Well, Waitangi Black was, I started at my previous school, at Whakatane High School. I started with her, and I went to apply, and she said, look, we're full. But I mean, I might just give her a call and just see, are you interested? And
I am interested, and
Online.
the only one that I could get into was Toi or Hall Mai, or
Yeah.
it's not called that anymore, is it? Something. They had an online beginners class for. I thought it looked a bit. I thought it might be even more basic than I need, but and it was completely online, and you just did your own thing for 6 or 12 weeks, and I thought, no, I need some kanahi to kanahi, face to face, you know,
Yeah.
and at least, you know, once or twice, once a week or sometime, you know, sometime in the session. I'm okay with Zooming, but it wasn't even an online thing. It was just you did your own thing. So I thought, no, that's not going to work for me.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think having that face to face is important, because you know you even have karakia together. You do what you learn waiata, and you're actually speaking to people, and you've got the tutors right there that can actually. I did start many years ago with the Aotearoa. That was a university that was down. They were actually down Valley Road, and I started down there, and then my job just got too busy, you know.
Oh yes, I did that course. I did that with Jim McGarvey and
Okay.
his two sisters, Medi, and they were amazing. He was an amazing, you know, font of knowledge. I don't know if they'd still be doing that, but yeah, I used to go once a week. I did a bit like you, the life and the job as the year went on, it became harder and harder to do the homework and keep it up. But yeah, and I feel like I've lost any of that. It became quite hard quite quickly, and if you didn't have practice in between, it's almost like you need, you know, immersion. It was immersion style, but only once a week, you know, so you need kind of more, I think.
I think you need the audio too of somebody like, did you have the Morrisons, not the Morrisons, Stacey, and, you know, in our first year where we had those te reo, they were really good. There was a lot.
Well, I did it before there was much technology around it, like there were no podcasts. It was 2006, I think. And I know that there's so much more, more resources, you know, you can listen to podcasts and watch programs on TV, you know, Māori TV have some good te reo and language ones. And yeah, so there's more access now, I think, there's no excuses really. But yeah, that's something I'm searching too. But they talk about the importance of communication, you know, being face to face with Māori. And I think that's kind of, a lot of people are like that. I think that once you've made a connection face to face, it sort of breaks down barriers. You see the person, you know, you've got a face to the name. Yeah.
So we've got less than 1 minute, Anne, before my recording, because I haven't got the upgrade.
Oh, okay. That's plenty.
Yeah, but you know, I just think this resource, I'd like to probably unpack it more in depth. You know, I mean, we've been talking and reading. It would be for me to kind of like have a study group just within this itself and really unpack it. A lot of schools in Whakatane are doing that. Whakatane Intermediate are doing it as a collective staff meeting, where they are going through a chapter, then they come back and they have